Welcome to another episode of PPSS Success Show. My name is Fong, and today we have a very, very unique guest. He has a very unique skill set that I believe everybody would love to have. For myself, I would love to have this skill set. It's not every day that you have a person who is a two-time Guinness record holder for greatest memory. He's been featured in over 2,000 appearances, interviews from Dr. Oz, Steve Harvey, Regent Kelly. He also won the competition on the show Superhumans. And one thing he's done very, very well is converting those appearances, those features into business sales, business success, business lead generation. He's taken that amazing brain of his background, his experience, and completely changed the PR space, helping his clients with marketing and sales strategies, making them more unforgettable, monetizing their messages, and of course, making their marketing and media exposures more memorable as well. So please welcome best-selling author, two-time Guinness record holder for greatest memory, Mr. Dave Farrow.
Oh, thank you very much for that intro. Wow, it's very flattering. It's amazing to see. Looking back, I just worked hard and did careers that appealed to me and I enjoyed, and I always tried to do my own thing instead of follow the crew. And I guess this led me to be here. So, but the way you say it like that, it's beautiful. Thank you.
That's awesome. Yeah, I was under a little bit of pressure there. I tried to memorize the whole thing just in case, but there's
I
still
can show
some
you a
notes.
trick or two for that. I can show you a couple things.
Awesome. Your past is something I would like to get into. Like,
Mhm.
how did you get to who you are today? A person who is an expert in communications with PR, yet also have this amazing skill set, being able to have a record holder as a greatest memory person.
Well, it's interesting. I'd love to say that it was, a great master plan, and I sat down and I made a 10-year plan, and it all worked out the way I wanted to. I certainly have accomplished things that I set down on a 5 and 10-year plan. I think those are good things. Setting goals is never a waste of time. I don't want to give any wrong impression, but in my case, it was really, I did something that worked for me because I had a need, and then kind of when I was done working on it and I picked my head up to look around, I realized that it could help other people, and that's happened about 3 times in my life in big ways that have made big changes. Two of them we're going to talk about today, but the first one is memory. I was diagnosed with ADHD and dyslexia when I was a kid. I was really suffering, struggling. I see my son now, same genetics. He's really struggling in K through 12, and it's a huge challenge. When your brain doesn't quite fit the classroom environment, but you're still really smart, it's an extra level of frustration. It's not that you can't do the task; it's you can't do the task the way the teachers want you to. But we could get into that forever. But long story short, I didn't see much future for myself, so I decided to figure out everything I could about the brain and memory, and I became obsessed, as I sometimes do, and I ended up really mastering the art of memory, and even inventing new techniques. And I'm one of the first people in this generation to invent 5 new memory techniques. And I did a double-blind neuroscience study at McGill University to prove my memory modes theory, and a couple other things that I'm really proud of. But it all started with I had a problem and I had to figure out how to solve it. Once I solved it, then other people came up to me and said, "Hey, how'd you do that?" And I started sharing it with them. And then I realized, well, this could be big. And I think that's a real organic way to see a business. It's not this top-down planning way, but I've heard it from a bunch of business owners. A friend of mine, Smith, who started UGG Boots, had the same sort of experience where he was trying to sell stuff from America into Australia, and in the process discovered that Australia had these really cool boots that America hadn't discovered. So he went in the other direction. And so it's kind of like try to solve something for yourself, and you find that you have a bigger market.
Mhm. So the entrepreneurship, the business stuff, and all kind of stuff came after you realized you had the skill set that everybody kind of wants to know more about.
Yeah, I mean, I always wanted to be an entrepreneur. I always wanted to run a business. And the irony is, I remember distinctly thinking, I've got to, master my memory and improve my brain so that I can someday figure out what kind of business I want to do. And I never thought that it was going to be the same. I never thought it was going to be the memory business.
Mhm.
Um, but it solved my problem. And then I realized, well, I'm not the only one with that problem. And I think that's a really good business strategy is find a problem that you know really well, and then automatically the best customers for that because you're the first customer. right? You know the solution, you know the pain points, you know how to speak from it, and people believe you because you've been there.
Mm.
Most of the time, the second time I did that was with PR, same sort of idea. I needed to promote this memory business, and I was just a guy, living in a bachelor apartment. I didn't have any funding or anything, didn't have any mentors, so I wanted to get advertising, and publicity was a really good vehicle, but I did it a different way. I started using data and then sharing that data with the media to show them that there's a story here. And then they would talk to me to comment on that story. And that's how I would get on the air. And it happened again and again and again. I was able to make lots of sales from it. So I was solving my own marketing problem. And then other authors and stuff came up to me and said, "Hey, how did you get in the New York Times? How'd you get on the Today Show? How'd you get on Dr. Oz?" Right? I mean, these are, huge things. And that's when I realized I had a business for other people. So, you can kind of follow your own heart, but always keep in mind that, like, if you're struggling through something and you solve a problem, maybe that solution can be good for someone else.
That is awesome. Now, solving that problem, when the school kind of like teachers kind of failed you a little bit, where they go, okay, you're not doing well, this is not for you, and all that kind of stuff. Lots of kids would probably go, okay, well, I guess school's not for me, and lots of parents would probably follow what the teachers say and go, okay, I guess academics is not my son's strong suit. What did you do mentally that goes, you know what? No, I'm gonna make it work, and I'm gonna find a way to do it.
Well, there's a really good brain hack. I do talk about this in my book, Brain Hacker, so this was why I bring it up. That I did without thinking of it as a brain hack, but I just saw two different possibilities, and it's really good for decision making because by doing this visualization exercise, you can get rid of bias. So many times we're thinking of what other people tell us we should do and what you should do and everything. And if you visualize, okay, if I take this path, this is what's going to happen. If I take this path, this is what's going to happen. And you paint those pictures very, very clearly, then you're the only one making that decision. And other people's bias and opinion, I mean, that'll come in a little bit if they have some experience or if it makes sense. But for the most part, I was kind of, sitting there, and I was sitting there actually in the principal's office, and I was looking at the type of life I would have if I just believed what the experts said. That I, can't do college, university. I can't take higher learning. I can't, get good grades. I can't, master my brain. I'm gonna be like a factory worker, like my dad. Nothing wrong with that, but that was what I was visualizing, and I saw how emotionally devastated I was and how much potential I had lost. And then there was this other view. If I disagreed with all the experts and kind of went my own way, it looked like there was just nothing but possibility. It wasn't clear, but it was so much better than the alternative.
Mm.
And that's how I made the decision.
Oh,
Just
wow.
just visualize as clearly as you can the two paths, and it'll become very clear what you should do.
Cool. Now, at what point did you realize that your memory was something that was amazing?
Well, naturally, I do not have. I apologize. I have a cold right now, so I'm just if I sound odd. Um, naturally I don't have a great memory. I can be very forgetful without techniques. I can learn slow. I can have difficulty with focus. Anybody with ADHD, it doesn't wave a magic wand to get rid of that. But what I have is strategies that I can employ. So to be less forgetful, I have location-based memory strategies so I can remember where to put things. And I have habits that I've developed over time to get myself very, very, very sharp and able to learn things very, very quickly. So it's really more of if you get into the art of memory and you take some of my courses, the real advantage, if you have an advantage, is if you're a very creative thinker. If you're a very creative person, but you struggle in kind of the 9 to 5 or the traditional academic approach, and you love a more creative approach, this is how to run your brain. And the more creative you are, the better it'll work for you. The people who actually do incredibly well with memory techniques, so not just me, but actually the guy whose record I broke, actually Dominic O'Brien, is a friend of mine in England. He's a famous memory guy over there, and he was dyslexic as well. And I started to see a pattern, and the pattern goes something like this. People are struggling. They're not getting the best grades. They're not reaching their potential, let's say mentally. They learn some strategies and techniques, and the result is huge difference. And they're hooked. They love it. It's an adrenaline rush. It's exciting. And then they do it again and again and again, and they become the best at it, right? There's another group of folks who take my courses, and the problem or solution is they're doing pretty well. Some of them are really, really good students. The ones I have the most difficulty with are the ones who were A students in high school, but now they're in college. And let's say they went into something that's memory intensive, like chemistry or biology or something. Then the strategies they had in high school aren't good enough for college. They basically, they were hard workers. They put in a lot of hours, but there's no amount of hours that you can put into in the college level to handle the memory work that's required. You simply can't use rote memory for all of it. You just will not perform at a high level. So it's when the A student starts failing that they don't know what to do. And those are the most difficult ones to teach the memory techniques to, because we got to kind of teach them how to relearn and to start over. And they're like, but no, this thing works for me. And I was like, yeah, it works for you, but it has a limit. And memory techniques and memory strategies have no limit. But
Mhm.
it takes a little bit to learn. So usually the students that are doing the worst end up having the biggest turnarounds.
No, that falls right into like coaching, mentoring, and helping other people succeed. For you,
Mhm.
when you're trying to convince somebody, hey, this is the way to do it. I know you've been doing this for years and years and years, and it's worked so far. You have to unlearn it, and they're resistant.
Yeah,
How do you convince them
especially
otherwise?
if that has served them in that level. But it's that old phrase that what got you here won't get you there.
Right. So how do you get them to go, oh, I need to start listening to you now? Like, do you give examples? Do you make them do certain things, and then for them to realize on their own, okay, this guy know what he's talking about. I gotta relearn everything.
Well, I'll let you know, most of my training has been, live audiences, like large audiences. I haven't, I don't like the coaching environment for
Mhm.
precisely this reason. You're dealing with egos and stuff. So I don't coach people one-on-one anymore, but I do have some very powerful and interactive courses that people take. But what I can tell you from my experience is that you start with something that definitely works. There's a skepticism that they have to overcome that in my case, let's say you can memorize more with memory techniques than you can with their strategies, with their effort and stuff. And once you convince them that there is something here, there's something going on here that's more powerful than what they had, then they get excited, or at least they get a little jealous. Those two things, and there's a little jealousy. But I've had a lot of people, say, "Oh no, those techniques don't work for me. I've got my own, strategies and stuff." And then I see them just like flipping through flashcards and doing rote memory, and they don't realize that the brain is so much more robust than that. But they've been doing it for so long, they know, okay, if I put an hour into this, I will memorize this much, and if I put 4 hours into it, I'll memorize four times that, and they get this thing in their head and they don't think of learning a new way to do it, and so many people get stuck. So like that's a big lesson if somebody really wants to succeed in life, is at some point be willing to just throw out everything that you think is true and from scratch, because there's some assumptions that we make that can hold us back.
Mhm. Now, are you able to share with us a couple techniques or strategies for people, like for the everyday average person? Is there something that would work well for them? And then for
Absolutely, yeah.
somebody who's like a CEO or who's managing big companies, what would be good for them?
All right, so a couple things to understand about memory. And then we can actually get into talking about more about PR, which is what you were interested in before. Um, if you remember anything, it's not because your brain has a space that it's filling up. What memory actually is a series of connections. So we are very, very good at recognizing things we've seen before, but not good at making those connections. So I'll give you an example. We can do this study where you look at a bunch of faces. So I'll show you, like, say, five pictures of people, right? And then you can wait 10 minutes and then you look at another 30 pictures. You can pick out those five people. We're very good at recognizing things we've seen before. That's a survival mechanism, because we had to be able to retrace our steps when we're traveling somewhere. We had to be able to go back and recognize things going backwards. The problem is when we start attaching a name to that person, our brain doesn't have any really good natural strategy to connect that. So what we have to do is use a technique. One of the best techniques is called the costume party technique. So imagine you were at a costume party, right? Every Halloween, hopefully it's Halloween, and somebody dresses up like Superman. right? The following year, you see that person, they're dressed as something else, but in the back of your head, you'd be like, hey, I know he was dressed like Superman last year, right? You might not remember their name, but that costume stuck. And it stuck for the same reason why you're able to recognize people's faces, why you're able to retrace your steps when you're traveling down a path, things like that. Your brain is very good at making these connections for survival, but it has to be a direct connection. So basically, what we do is we do it in our heads, right? So we'll take a person's name and we'll turn it into something that you could visualize. One of the things I did for my name for the longest time, my last name is Pharaoh. I would put on a little Egyptian hat and I'd call myself the Pharaoh of memory. And it's silly, it's stupid. I'm not doing it anymore because I want to appeal more to corporate stuff, but it worked. I'd go to college and I'd do it, and the following year, people would say, "Hey, the Pharaoh of memory, I remember you, right?" And we'd be handing out these hats and everything. So like, it really, really does work. And so typically, what you do is you'll find something that's like a rhyme or something that sounds similar, or some way you can visualize that name and turn it into a costume. That's the most basic technique. Now, as you and I both know, there are more complex names out there. There's hyphenated names. There's different language groups. So it doesn't fit everything. The technique does have more advanced versions, but in the class that we have right now, in session right now, that's a good tip to get started with.
Awesome. For me, I remember history lessons more because of Animaniacs than
Yes.
than the actual class.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and how many times people like they hear a classical music song and they think of the Bugs Bunny version, right? So our brains are making connections all the time. And those connections are what our memories actually are. It's just a series of connections. So what a memory technique does is it makes a very powerful connection. Um, what I was able to show is that the different types of connections make a difference. So people have different ways to make those mental connections. So for some people, a personal connection works really well. If I get you to visualize your hairbrush instead of just a hairbrush, right? Other people, a connection that has to do with action works really well. That hairbrush smacks you upside the head, something like that, right? And there's a couple different veins that people fall into. So partially in this technique is if you've ever tried memory techniques before and it might not have worked for you, what I want you to do is try making the images different than the way the speaker actually tells you. Most of the time, the speakers are going to tell you a very visual image that usually involves action to it because that's what a lot of the people who teach this are oriented to.
Right.
But there's different ways to visualize these things.
Mhm.
Let me think of a couple other better tips here. How about looking up? Did you know that looking up can improve your memory?
Yes.
Yeah, I did this with Steve Harvey. It was awesome. What you want to do is literally take your eyeballs and look up for a second while you're trying to remember the information. And if you think to yourself, hey, you've probably noticed that some people do that from time to time, right? They stop and go, oh, gee, I wonder what that is. So we don't know why, but looking up actually sends more electricity to our cerebral cortex, our hippocampus, memory centers, and higher learning centers of the brain. Our brain becomes more active when we look up than when we don't. And we honestly don't know why. One theory is that looking up blocks out all the distractions. We're not looking at anything, right? So we're just looking up. But we do know that it has to do with the optic nerve. Behind your eyeball is a jumble of nerves. It's not that one tiny little thing you see in the cartoons, right? It's a big bundle of nerves. So when you look up, somehow that triggers more energy in the brain. And long story short, it actually improves your memory. So if you're ever feeling forgetful, our tendency is to look down, right? Have you ever done that? And that's actually what we do when we're trying to calm ourselves down and deal with our emotions. And it actually makes our memory worse. In studies, we know that recall goes down when you're looking down and it goes up when you're looking up. And the weird thing is, that's the opposite of what people do when they're in a test, right? Think the last time you were in an exam, you're looking down all the time. You're looking down at pace. How many times have you handed in the test? You give up. You don't know the answer, right? You give up. You walk out the door. You start looking up and thinking about the test, and immediately that answer pops into your head, right?
That's happened more than once.
Yeah, so biology plays a big role. That's one of the biggest brain hacks is to stop, lower your stress and look up, and it'll actually improve your memory. I mean, depending on the situation, up to 20 to 30%, sometimes 50%.
Mhm.
Big
I'm
difference.
gonna be a little greedy here because one of the memory techniques I was taught before was if you have a whole list of something that you want to remember, then you try to associate an action, something very, very visual, and you create the storyline that goes from one to another to another to another. My
Oh yeah.
issue was trying to remember the story now. So first I have to create that story, which takes a lot of time for me, and then I have to remember that story. So
I see what you mean.
how would you go? No, so not only am I memorizing the items, I'm memorizing a whole plot line. So how do I
Right.
go around that?
The secret to that, and that actually that technique is taught wrong a lot of times. I don't like to say people are wrong, but there is a wrong and a right way to teach it. Um, if you're making a plot, you're doing it wrong. The best way to think of these stories is a story without a plot. Okay, so let's give like an example here. I'm gonna make a list. Ice cream just off the top of my head. Let's say we had a grocery list, right? Apples, scissors, I don't know, bread, uh, um, celery, eggs. Like this, we have a few things in a grocery list, right? What I would get you to do is to mentally place them around a room, or better yet, actually, everybody could relate to this. Let's place them around a car. Okay. So you're sitting in a car, you've got a steering wheel in your hand, and you have ice cream melting on that steering wheel. There's no plot, no characters, no nothing. You're just putting it into a situation where your brain goes, "Hey, it's not supposed to be there and it's not supposed to be doing that." And that wakes up your brain and you pay more attention. That's really the point is its uniqueness. You want to trigger your brain to go, "That's not supposed to happen. That's unnatural. That's that we don't want that to happen." So it wakes up, right? And then you just move on. To the right of the steering wheel, you've got like your control panel and everything. Imagine somebody like threw a bunch of apples at that control panel and busted it up, right? And you got apples like embedded in there, right? Somebody stuck a pair of scissors right into the glove compartment, or there's scissors bursting out of the glove compartment, right? And bread, you tried to slice bread using the window. The window went up and sliced a whole loaf of bread in half, right? And maybe in the chair beside you, you've got a whole bunch of celery sticks sitting there. Now, pay attention to this. This is really cool. What was on the steering wheel?
The ice cream,
Ice cream. That's right. And what do we throw at the console here?
apples,
Apples. That's right. And what was coming out of the glove compartment?
scissors,
Yeah, I had to think of the word glove compartment more than scissors. Yeah. And what were you bisecting there with the window?
the bread,
And what was sitting on the chair?
the celery.
That's right. And you can keep on going. But so like that's not a story with a plot though.
Mhm.
That is a series. The best way to think of it is a series of misshapen images. A series of imagery. And it's not just images. You want to put sounds in there and all your senses, but it has to be sensory information that doesn't make sense.
Mhm.
That pops out of the system and your brain goes, wait, what's going on? This technique owes itself to evolution, actually. So I actually argue about this in my book that I believe that the memory technique is I call it the tiger in the jungle. And if you think back, yeah, 250,000 years ago, something like that, right? Hunter gatherers, right? We have roughly the same brain that we did back then. But what did we do most of the time? We traveled through, through the earth, and we tried to find food, and we tried to avoid predators. So if you're looking at a whole scene and you see a tree and you see a rock and you see a stream and you see a little squirrel and you see another rock and you see a tiger and you see another tree and you see by the time you get to the third one, the tiger has eaten you, right? So the point is our brains through evolution have evolved to pay attention to what's different, pay attention to what stands out and what's weird, right? So that ice cream melting on the steering wheel is our modern version of I looked at a whole scene and I saw the tail of a tiger and my brain woke up, right? Because the brains that didn't wake up got eaten. Okay. So it's a survival mechanism. We're tricking our brain into using that survival mechanism, but we live in the modern world. There are no tigers anymore, right? We got to pay the bills and we have other stresses, right? So what we have to do is we have to be aware of how our brain thinks, and then we have to use that on purpose. We have to use conscious techniques to use it on purpose. I have a theory about brain training that I think it's um not to make a big deal out of it, but I think brain training could save the world. And here's my argument, okay? Follow me here. I am not exaggerating at all. See, we as human beings, most of our modern ailments, everything from Alzheimer's, heart disease, cancer, diabetes, of course, all the diseases, but also modern ailments like inflation, like stress around relationships, like all these different things. Most of them can be traced back to have to do with the fact that we are traditional cavemen. and women, right? We are hunter gatherers, yet we're suddenly wake up and we're thrust into this modern world that is not natural for us. Hunter gatherers, they do very intense hunts for short periods of time, and then they rest for hours. And now we're put in a cubicle for 8 hours a day. No wonder our brains don't remember anything, can't get anything done, right? There's only a small percentage of people who seem to be very well adapted to the modern world, and most people suck at it. That's the truth.
Mhm.
You know, that same part of your brain that makes you afraid of the tiger that could come into the village, that's the same part of your brain that gets afraid of not paying the rent at the end of the month. But you can't do anything about the rent at the end of the month, right? So you just get more and more stressed. That cortisol builds up in your system and you get all those ailments I talked about, right? And I'm not even going to get into like, you know, our diet and everything else. So what do we do about it though? We know that we're natural beings living an unnatural life, but we're here now. We don't want to go back into the forest, right? We want to have flushing toilets and iPhones. So what do we do about it? The only thing that can adapt quickly is the brain. We can take all the strategies that our brain used to survive in the jungle and we can adapt them and change them slightly. We can hack them, in other words. That's why I call them brain hacks to help us live in the modern world. So this is like one of the things I talk about in my book is insomnia. If you get insomnia, if you can't sleep, you have to understand what your brain wants. Your brain doesn't want lights on all the time late at night, right? So you got to turn the lights off about an hour or two before bed. You have to do something that exhausts your brain. Your brain wants to get involved in a story, get involved in a plot. So read before bed, like little things like this. If you do a bunch of different hacks, all of a sudden you don't have insomnia anymore, or you don't have this issue or that issue. I had one about food craving. So this is a good one. I was addicted to Wendy's Frosties for a while, right? I used to have one every day on the way home. I was gaining so much weight. I was like 50 pounds overweight, 60 pounds overweight. It was crazy. And I decided I had to do something about this. Like, I'm the memory guy, I'm the brain guy. I got to be able to fix my brain and do it, right? So I decided to do a memory technique for food. I imagined eating a Wendy's Frosty and it was disgusting. Like there were bugs on it, and the next time I ate it, there was like motor oil in it, or there was like mold on it and stuff. Like, I want to make it clear, the Wendy's Corporation did not produce any bad Frosties for me, but I imagined it, and I did this for just about a week. That was it. And I haven't touched a Frosty ever since. They got this new one, like strawberry and everything. I would have been all over that, and I'm not the slightest bit interested. So I'm using that part of my brain that gets disgusted by rotting things and gross things. That's a survival mechanism. It goes back a million freaking years or more. I'm using that part of my brain to deal with some modern problem. That's what I mean. Brain training can be such a boon on society if we realize that we can use our brain to adapt to the modern world. And it's just a little hack at a time, and understand that we are cavemen and women trying to live in this modern world.
Mhm. That is absolutely fascinating. One of the things I never thought I would hear is the melting ice cream on your steering wheel is the modern day version of the tiger. I'm like, that's our title. Um,
There you go. I like it. Yeah. Well, yeah. I'm sorry I went on my soapbox there for a bit, but I really do think this makes a huge difference. When I was diagnosed with probably the most modern disease you could imagine, ADHD and dyslexia, that's like, I want to say it's a real thing, but it's kind of a made up disease.
mm,
You know, in that reading is a human invention, right? So I always argued that dyslexia shouldn't be considered a disease, because that's like kind of like saying, somebody who's bad at basketball has a disease, right? It just means they can't do a layup or something like that, you know? But that was one of the most modern ailments, but I still went back to how the brain is originally supposed to work. And then
mm.
I figured out things like speed reading and figured out other strategies. Training the brain can solve all of your modern problems. It's really the only thing that can, in my opinion.
Man, I got so many other questions. You just said speed reading. I'm like, oh, I got a question about that. But I want to jump into the PR stuff for a bit here. So when
All
a
right.
company comes up to you and go, hey, we want to hire you, what does a memory guy have that you can offer that helps us? Like, what do you do for a PR company?
Sure. Well, so I can actually tell you a little bit of our strategy. Basically, I like to do things a little differently. And the way I was able to get a lot of publicity was by understanding that the market right now is under a tremendous amount of pressure to get clicks. So what I would do is I would look up data on particular stories, things around memory, and then I would share that data with the media and say, hey, here is a trend going on in this sector. Here's a trend with students today. Here's a trend with, Gen X or Gen Z or something like that. And I'd say, hey, do a story on it. People are searching for this, and I can be your expert that can talk about it. That was the strategy that got me over 2,000 interviews, got me, New York Times and, the Today Show and everything else. And so when I start, so the first thing is figure out the strategy that works really well. For me, it was applying data science to PR, which typically I would say are two opposites. A lot of people in PR, they're more relationship, right-brained oriented, so they don't think of data. So that was new. And then when I started, really succeeding at it, a whole bunch of other people came up to me and said, "Hey, how do you do this?" And we found we could do this with other clients. So we will look up the data for a particular client. We'll find out what's going on in their sector, and then we'll develop the stories that are going on, and then ask the media to use our client to comment on them as an expert. And that's really the magic formula and why we get about double the results of an average publicist for about the same or less money.
Mhm. And then I assume that you guys craft the message that they will present when they're on these interviews, when they're on these podcasts or these platforms, so that the audience who hears these messages would actually remember what was presented.
Yeah, so one of the things we call it memorable marketing, and you hit the nail on the head that one of our strategies when I train people to speak in the media is to tell stories and to paint pictures in the minds of the people who are watching and listening. It's absolutely essential to imagine this more than just when like I've done it in this interview without even thinking, the ice cream on the steering wheel, but also the tiger in the jungle, and also when we're talking about like some of my early life when I was sitting in the principal's office, like I didn't just tell you this is the principal, this is the thing you should do, this is the strategy you should employ. I said, okay, here I was in this situation at this time, and this is what I did, and this is why it worked. You have to be able to be a storyteller in order to appeal to the mind of your customer. And that's what we try our best to do that at FARROW Communications.
So if a person is not a very good storyteller, what are some of the things that you recommend them do to at least heighten that skill set?
Well, first off, we get them to do a big creative exercise to
Mm.
sit down and write down all of the stories that they could be thinking of, everything to deal with their product and service and everything. And then you start cutting. So the key to good storytelling is what you cut out and not what you include. So you want to make sure that, so I usually say it's kind of like writing poetry, or like frozen concentrated orange juice as opposed to regular orange juice. You want to concentrate on just the key factors. And these stories whittle down to anecdotes. Another thing that I employ a lot is the story circle. I really am a big believer in the story circle, but for sales. Um, if you want someone to buy something, what you want to do is you pull them out of where they're at right now and show them that they could go on a path to something better. That's the hero's journey. They go on that path and they encounter, a bunch of different important points. They learn things along the way. That's like a salesperson kind of telling you, hey, this car has this feature, this thing has this feature. So you educate yourself about the industry. And then when you feel comfortable, you get the product and you return back to where you were, but you're enriched because you got the product. So there is a sales aspect to that story circle. So when I teach clients this might be a little heady, but I'm getting to a point. When I teach clients, if someone's going on a TV show or something like that, right? And they're talking about overcoming addiction. We've had a number of great guests that have been former addicts and they're overcoming addiction. One that actually ran an addiction center for veterans. So it was a really great story. But he would just, he would make you feel terrible about where he was and how horrible a life he was, and now he's better. And I said, no, you need to make it more of an arc, right? You need to be like, I was in this horrible place and I wouldn't want anybody else to be there, but I wanted something better. That's the key of the hero's journey, is to want something better than you have. And then I learned this, and then I learned this, and then I learned this. And now I'm back and I'm telling your whole audience here, in the hopes of maybe there's someone out there listening that's just like me, and you don't have to go through what I did, right? That is how you turn it into a story. You have like a lesson at the end, you have a journey that you went on, and you can do this hero's journey. You can do it in a couple of sentences, or you can do it in a 8 season arc on HBO, right?
That's very, very true. When like in today's day and age, we have AI popping up everywhere, and lots of people are utilizing AI to create their marketing, to create their ads, to create their sales pitch and all that kind of stuff. Do you see AI as a hindrance or a tool that someone like yourself could actually maximize even more?
Yeah, no, we started using AI as early as possible, and a lot of people don't realize AI is more than just Chat GPT. I mean, we have AI sending emails to other email accounts, opening them up and replying to keep those emails like nice and warm and fresh, so that they have a high deliverability rate. For example, we have AI that does data analysis. So I've been a big believer in this, and embraced it for a good 3 4 years before AI was a household name. So it's definitely here to stay, but I do think it's going to be more like, think of in Star Trek when one of the characters is talking to the computer. It's like the Next Generation, when one of the characters is trying to solve a problem, like Geordi's in the engineering bay. If you're not a Trekker, follow me here. The computer knows everything, can answer everything perfectly, but it doesn't know the questions to ask, right? And then so the human being says, well, what about this? If we isolate that and that, show me the result, computer. And boom, that's the answer, right? So who came up with the answer? Was it the engineer who told the computer what to do, or was it the computer that crunched all the numbers? I think we're going to see it like that in the future, that it's just a really complex tool. But we still have to ask the right questions. ChatGPT or AIs in general, at least, like, they're not even trying to get into the realm of what's the right question to ask, right? So that's our role.
Awesome.
And we're going to use this tool to answer the question. But I mean, in a very practical sense, at least right now, where the technology is at right now, I would say it drones on a lot. If you ask it to write an email, for example, it'll write one that's maybe 3 times too big. So what I usually tell my staff to do is I tell it to get the AI to write something and then cut it down to a half or a third of what it is. Really cut out the fluff. There's a lot of repetition and things like that. And if you do that, you're going to get some quality content.
Mhm. Awesome. Our time has gone by so fast, and I have still like a list of stuff I want to ask you. But
We went
I
on
just
so many different tangents. This has been great. I loved it.
love to be able to respect your time. Is like before we go, are there some daily exercises, daily routine stuff that people should implement into their lives that would help them maintain a healthier brain and a better memory for a longer time?
Absolutely. So I would say that there's a lot of belief. I'm going to say there's a big myth out there about the brain and brain training. There's a lot of apps that will get you to do exercises, and you'll get better at the app, and you'll think your brain is getting better, but in actuality, it's getting worse. There's an old saying, there's an old joke amongst neuroscientists that what was it? Crosswords and Sudoku will make you better at crosswords and Sudoku and not much else. And what they're talking about is the principle of transference. And it also tells you something about neuroscientists if they call that a joke. But what's really going on is your brain likes to be challenged by new things. And just doing one game, if you're playing the New York Times crossword, if you've done it for a while and you're good at it, you're not training your brain at all. You're not, you might be enjoying the game, go for it. Now, I play a lot of games that I'm good at too, and that's fine. But don't think that you're getting better, you're improving your brain by doing it. It feels like you're improving it because you're getting better at the skill. But once you get past that beginner phase, then your brain really doesn't have to change much or be challenged much to get to that expert level. There's not a lot of connections are being made. So what I actually suggest is you have to learn something every day. I like to learn foreign language vocabulary. That's my thing. I love it. But there's been some people who would go on their Facebook profile, and these are people in business who have like me, they have like thousands of friends on Facebook, like they've connected to people that they don't know, and to go through and like memorize or try to memorize, 5 or 10 people's names every day. And then all of a sudden, they know off the top of their head hundreds, thousands of names by the end of a month or 2 months, and their brain is so sharp. So that's one thing that really does translate to the rest of your life is if you challenge it by remembering new information. If you're trying to learn something new, learning a new music song, if you're like if you memorize musical notes, for example, or learning a foreign language vocabulary, or people's names, or studying for biology, or continuing your education or something, it's memorizing and recalling, making connections, and then testing those connections later on. That's what actually moves the needle in brain training. And there's a study by the Journal of the American Medical Association, JAMA, and it was 2014 now. But it was a big study, over 2,000 people over age 50, by the way, which is very rare for a brain study. A lot of times they're grad students. And it showed that what's called novel brain training, which is learning something new like this on a regular basis, it cut their risk for Alzheimer's by more than half.
Oh, wow.
So I think the jury is in. Your brain wants to be exercised and trained, but it has to be novel, different, interesting. That's why I said ice cream on the steering wheel. That's different. That's weird. That stands out from the rest. That's the tiger that stands out from the image of all these trees. So you do that every time and make sure that it's a surprise to you, that it's different and challenging, and you'll have a sharp brain your whole life, and I'll see you there.
That is an image I will remember for the rest of my life.
There you go.
There's a saying, I believe it was Henry Ford, that says, "Why am I uh, boggling my mind with all this useless information when I have access to it?" Right? So, what's that fine line for you? Like you
I
don't
think
just
that's
like you just don't go and memorize stuff that's not useful to you. You memorize stuff because of things that you find value for your brain and for future connections and whatnot. So for a person,
yeah.
what, how do they find that line?
Yeah, I mean that's why I like learning new languages, because I do travel, and like I had one time where I was in Thailand and I facilitated a conversation between a French guy and a Thai tuk tuk driver, and was able to translate back and forth in my French. I was actually better at the Thai than the French, and so like I've had experiences like that. So I love languages, and that's why I do that. But find out what it is for you. It could be learning a field of study that you've never known before. I know people who have backyard gardens and they're learning about biology and the names of all the plants and things like that. But it has to be something new, and never think that you're too old to learn something new, because the minute you stop learning something new, that's when you actually get old. That's when your brain starts really slowing down, and you think it's nature, you think it's the way your brain is, but it's not. It absolutely, you can change this at any time.
Awesome. Well, that's gonna conclude our formal portion. I got five quick rapid fire questions for you. Give me the first thing that comes to mind.
All
All right.
right, I'll
You
try.
ready? All right. You're stranded on the desert island. One food to eat for the rest of your life. No consequence.
Oh, pizza. Even though it's terrible for me, I still love the thing. Why
I
not?
was hoping Frosties.
No, no, I'm not going to touch those again.
Hollywood calls and goes, "Hey Dave, we love your story. You're an inspiration. We would love to do a biopic on you. Who would you cast to play you?"
Oh man, I don't know. It would have to be someone who's like a good actor. I don't know. I can't think of any. I'm not much for the names. Yeah, I'm at a loss. I don't
That's
know.
all good.
I don't
All
know.
good. So this good actor shows up at your door and goes, "Hey Dave, I got casted to play you. Let's go hang out. What does an amazing night out with you look like?"
I would think I want to learn everything about their profession. I want to learn everything about what they do. I had the honor of meeting Forrest Whitaker and becoming friends with him. And I went around. I stayed at his guest house for a couple of weeks, and I taught him memory techniques, and he was teaching me things about his industry and his life, and that was just so powerful. I wouldn't want to go out to clubs and party. I've done that. I would want to pick his brain and learn more about how he got to where he is.
Mhm. You're on a road trip and it's hours and hours on the end. For some reason or another, there's only one song that plays over and over and over again. What's that one song you don't mind listening to?
Hotel California,
Nice
maybe.
choice.
There you
Give
go.
me a number from 1 to 5.
2.
1, 2. So if you had to use chimneys as a metaphor for success, how is success like chimneys?
Well, you gotta, if you want to get to the top of one, then you got to go through a lot of dirt and grime and be willing to get filthy and, plug your nose sometimes. And you also got to squeeze out all the fat and everything that makes you too big to fit through if you're going to get to the top of the chimney in life. And when you get there, you're going to be tired, you're going to be exhausted, you're going to be filthy, but you'll be at the top and you'll be able to have the most beautiful view.
Awesome. So that's
Yeah.
how success is like chimneys. Thank you very much. Any final words that you would like to share, and what's the best way for people to get in touch with you?
I love this. This is fantastic. Yeah, you just Google me, Dave Farrow. You can check out my book, Brain Hacker, on Amazon. Or if you want to get a hold of me directly, Farrow Communications. We do 30-minute consultations for businesses and authors and speakers at no charge. We'll give you a good view of what your PR possibilities really are. And I do some courses online, but you can just get Brain Hacker and see from there.
Awesome. Thank you very much. So everybody make sure you connect with Dave here. It's not every day you get to connect with a two-time Guinness record holder. So it's been a lot of fun. Thank you very much for your time. Thank you for all the hacks that you've shared. And it's been a very fast hour. So thank you very much.
It's been a pleasure. I love this. Take care.
Awesome. He is Dave. My name is Fong. Until next time, today is the day to unlock your peak potential. We'll see you later.